I guess you could kind of think of this as like a pullback kind of question, right? So we can see where we have some Renko bars here, and we have two EMAs. We have a 10 period and a 20 period EMA. So we want signals in the direction of the EMAs, right? So when the EMA 10 or the fast period EMA is above the slow period EMA, we're only looking for long signals. And of course, if the EMAs flip direction, yeah, so like over here, we had only a couple of bars here, but you know, if the fast EMA is below the slow EMA, then we'd only be looking for short signals and pullbacks for a short signal there, right? So this would be an example of a pullback for a long trend and a long signal there. So let's identify a couple of places here. So here we go. So this almost looks exactly like the screenshot that was sent in here, right? So we have the fast EMA above the slower EMA, and then we had a little pullback and a wick. So yeah, so this is one thing that actually I didn't mention about it, is that on the reversal bar, basically we need a wick to be touching one of the EMAs, right? We need that wick touching one of these EMAs here. And let's see, let's find an example of a short signal here. And yeah, here we go. So we actually have an example of a couple of short signals, right? So there's a wick touching the EMA, the slower EMA. And here's one where the wick is touching the faster EMA. Yeah, so the wick can either touch the 10 EMA or the 20 EMA. And let's see, we also need a pullback to either the 10 EMA or the 20 EMA. So we need a pullback here as well. We're looking for some pullback bars. So let's pull up this screenshot here. Yeah, the instructions say, here, let's actually copy and paste the instructions here so everybody else can see them, see what we're doing here. So basically, here's what we're doing. So we're looking for basically the 10 EMA and the 20 EMA, right? We're looking for, you know, the direction that the EMAs are crossed, you know, what direction they're stacked. And then we need a pullback to either the 10 EMA or 20 EMA. So we want the bar, you know, the Renko bars, the pullback bars, basically to touch one of the EMAs, right? So of course, they'll touch the 10 EMA first. So we only need to check for a pullback to the 10 EMA. So obviously, if they pull back to the 20 EMA, then it's definitely pulled back past the 10 EMA. And then we're looking for a wick to either touch the 10 EMA or the 20 EMA as well. Actually, let's see here. David's saying use a Unirenko 2510. Let's see. All right. So we'll switch this over to Unirenko 2, 5, and 10. And that definitely changes things a little bit. And let's see, let's make some adjustments here. There. All right, so we've got a bunch of long signals now here. And yeah, actually we have a bunch more over here as well. And I don't think this one's going to qualify. Yeah, that doesn't look like the wick is touching the EMA 20 here. So I think that one is a no signal. All right. So there we go. So let's get this, let's start building here. Let's get this going. So let's see, let's check basically condition number 1 is to see, you know, what direction the EMAs are stacked on top of each other, right, or crossed, what direction the EMAs are crossed in. So to do that, we're going to use the comparison solver, right? We're comparing the EMA 10 with the EMA 20 to see which one is above the other. So let me give this a name here. All right, there's a little name for us. So next for input A, we'll put in the EMA 10 in here. So we'll hit the button and scroll down to our EMA. right? Change the period to 10, and then we can click OK. So there is our 10 period EMA. And then for input B, we'll change that to the 20 period EMA. There's our EMA. Change the period to 20 there. And let's click OK. And there we go. So now, right, what we see on the chart from BloodHound is the direction, that the EMAs are crossed in. So we can see here we had 2 bars where the EMAs crossed each other, right, for a little downtrend, and then they flip back up. So, all right, the next part here is we need a pullback to either the 10 or the 20 EMA. So of course, the pullback is always going to be to the 10 EMA first, right? So we just need to do that one check there. So let's see here. A pullback to the 10 EMA. Let's see, there's a couple ways we could do this. So one way is we could look at the closing price. Well, actually, both ways are going to look at the closing price, right? So we know that a pullback to the 10 EMA has occurred when the closing price, right, crosses the EMA, or the closing price goes below the 10 EMA. So if we're looking at just the closing price of the bars, right, the closing price goes up, 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 and then the closing price crosses the 10 EMA. So there's 2 ways we could approach this. We could look at the closing price crossing the 10 EMA, or we could just compare the close to the 10 EMA and check if the 10 EMA is below it, right? Something like that. So, how do I want to do this? Yeah, I think what I'm gonna do is actually I'm gonna compare the closing price of the bar to the 10 EMA and make sure that the closing price of the bar was below it here. So I'm not going to do the crossover because, see, the crossover happened way back here. But then we actually had a couple more bars go by before we actually get the signal. So keep in mind that we're looking for the long signal right there, right? But the crossover condition happened way back here, several bars back. And so we don't always know how many pullback bars there might be. We don't know how many bars might go by after the crossover, after the closing price crosses the 10 EMA. So checking for this crossover condition, it becomes a little more difficult because the number of bars is going to change. But we know that closing price is always going to be below the 10 EMA, right? 1 bar prior to the Renko bar reversing direction here. So where we get the signal, right, we always know that, yeah, we're going to get, the close is always going to be 1 bar behind, right? So we'll do that comparison of the closing price to the EMA 10 instead. So let's go indicator comparison. Connect that in. So we're going to compare the EMA 10 to the close price. Let's see here. All right, so let's put in, so for input A, let's put in the EMA 10 period. All right, there's our EMA 10 period. Then input B, that'll be the closing price of the bar. So we're going to change the type to price. Let's see here. All right. Yeah, so there we go. So we can kind of see that basically this solver is kind of creating, right, it's creating an output kind of seemingly opposite, but that's actually what we want, because remember, we're ultimately looking for a long signal here, right? So when that closing price goes below the 10 EMA, it's good that we're getting a long output when this condition happens, because we're ultimately looking for a long signal at the very end, right? Same thing over here. Let's flip this around here, right? So when the bar basically pulls back, below the EMA 10, we're getting a long output for basically, so condition number 2 is we're getting a long output, and which is what we need because we're looking for a long signal here. So we need a long output for condition number 2 in order to get a long signal at the end here. All right, let's see here. And the next step, when we get this long output, we need to extend it forward or push it forward onto the signal bar, right? So we're getting a long output on this bar, but remember, we need the long output on the signal bar, on this bar right here. So we're going to use the lookback node to extend the signal forward. So if we connect that in, right, there we go. So look, remember, we had the long output on the down bar here, right? This down reversal bar is what produced the long output, but then we shifted it forward onto the signal bar, right? Same thing over here, right? These 3 down bars were producing the long output, but then we shifted it forward 1 bar so that we're getting the long output on the signal bar here. So this lookback node is basically, it's displacing the output forward 1 bar. So I'm going to rename this so we know what it's doing here. So it's doing a displacement of 1 bar for us. There. All right, so that is, that's rule number 1 and rule number 2 for us. And if we want to, we can start connecting things up and kind of begin to see what the conditions being built here. So there. So if I connect these all into an AND node, right, we can begin to see the setup here. And we're not done yet, right? Because obviously, those are not signal bars. So we need to do this. We need to check the wick here for our final step. So checking to see whether the wick is touching a moving average here. So we're going to have to kind of break this down into its individual components. So what is, the wick of a bar? Well, the wick of a bar, for Renkos, the wick of the bar is going from the open price of the Renko bar to the low price, right? Yeah, let me take that off there. Yeah, so if it's an up bar, we're going from the open to the low price. Now, if it's a down bar, like we have here, we're going from the open to the high price, right? So for Renkos, going from the open to the high or open to the low defines the wick. Yeah, that's the definition of the wick here. So we're going to have to do, to see if the wick is touching one of these EMAs, we need to compare the open to the EMA and the low to the EMA, or vice versa, compare the open to the EMA or the high to the EMA. Right? So in an up bar situation, the open needs to be above the 10 EMA or above the 20 EMA. And then the low needs to be below the 10 or below the 20 EMA. Right? So the open needs to be above one of these EMAs and the low needs to be below one of these EMAs. Right? So, so we're going to do multiple kind of comparisons here. So let's grab another comparison solver. And we'll connect that into our result node like so. Here, I'll zoom in a little bit. So let's see, let's first compare the open price to, we'll do the EMA 10 first. All right, so the open price. So for input A, we're gonna change it from indicator value to price. And we don't want the closing price, we want the open price. So we're gonna switch both of these to the open price. There. Now input B, that will be our EMA 10. There's our EMA, plug in 10. And so if we look, so on this particular bar right here, right, the open is actually below the EMA 10. So we're getting a short output because the open is below the EMA 10. But then once the open goes above the EMA 10, we're going to get a long output. All right, so that's one part of it. Now let's do the low. Let's see here. Well, actually no, let's make the other solver. So we'll compare the open to the EMA 20, right? So let's grab another comparison solver here. Connect that in. And we'll compare the open to the EMA 10, I'm sorry, 20, EMA 20. There. All right, so we're going to switch the type to price again, and then change our prices to the open price, like so. All right, and then input B, that'll be our EMA 20. There's our EMA. Change it to 20. There. All right. Now, so we can see the open of all these bars are above the EMA 20. So we're getting a long output as expected. Let's see here. Here we go. Yeah, so we have a couple of bars where the open price is below the EMA 20. We have a short output. So there's that. So now let's compare the low price to the EMA 10. And with the same solver, we can compare the high price to the EMA 10, right? So let's grab another comparison solver. Connect that in there. So we're either comparing the low price or the high price to the EMA 10. And let's see here. Yeah, so input A, let's change that to price. So for a long situation, right, for a long signal, we're looking at the low price, right? We're looking at lower wicks, right? So it's going to be an up Renko bar, which will have a low priced wick. So for long outputs, we want to look at the low price. Now for signals in the opposite direction, right, we would be looking at Renko bars that are facing down, and so the wick would be the open to the high, so we'd use the high price for short signals. So let's change price type short to the high price. And now we'll compare that to the EMA 10. There you go, EMA, change that to 10. There. Now, let's see here. All right. Yeah, now if we look here, right, our low price is below the EMA 10, right, but we're not getting an output. But if we look at, right, these other bars over here, right, the low of the bar is above the EMA 10, we're getting an output, right? But we want an output when the low is below the EMA, not when the low is above the EMA. So what that's telling us is we need to reverse our outputs here, right? So let's set our let's set these outputs to 0 and then reverse the outputs like so. And there we go. So now whenever the low of the bar is below the EMA 10, we're getting a long output. And since we reversed the long outputs, we want to reverse the short outputs. So we're going to set these to 0 and then set that to 1. Right, so we can see the outputs are opposite of each other here. And let's see here. And then next, we need an AND node. Connect that in, like so. Let's see if we can find an example here. Yeah, here we go. So if we look at this up bar, right, the wick is touching the EMA 10. We have a long output. Right? Now, of course, we do have a long output on these down bars as well, because technically speaking, right, the low of the bar is below the EMA 10 and the open of the bar is above the EMA 10, right? But of course on a down bar, you know, that defines the body, right? The low to the open is the body of a down bar, you know, but on an up bar for a Renko, an up bar, it defines the wick, you know. So if we really wanted to kind of clear this up, we could grab a bar direction solver. Just slide that back here. And if I connect this in, there we go. That kind of cleans up, right, the wick. Just, yeah, cleans up and makes it, so what we see here is, you know, purely just wick touching the EMA 10. And let's see what else. Here we go. Yeah. So we have another up Renko bar and our wick touched that EMA 10 there. So we're getting there. So we have the wick, you know, touching the EMA 10. So now let's just complete it for the EMA 20 here. There. All right, so let's work down here. All right, so remember this solver here is comparing the open to the EMA 20. So what we need, basically, we need to kind of make a duplicate of this solver here, where it's comparing the low and the high to the EMA 10, but we can make a duplicate and compare it to the EMA 20. So what I'm going to do is switch over to our solvers tab here, right? And I can take this solver here, right, where we're comparing the low or the high price to the EMA 10. I can make a copy of it, like so. And we'll adjust it so that we're comparing the low or high to the EMA 20. And then I can go into our EMA, open that up, change the period to 20, and there we go. I just made a new solver that compares the low or the high to the EMA 20. So let's switch back over to our logic board, and then we'll go to solvers, existing nodes, and there is that new comparison solver I just made, right? So let's drag that down here. And then let's grab another AND node, like so. And take a look. Yeah, there we go. So if that wick is touching the EMA 20, right there and right there, and right there, we're getting a long output. Perfect. And if we so wanted, we could put our bar direction in there as well. So now, ultimately, the bar direction is not going to be necessary, right? Because remember, Actually, it is necessary. Yeah, I take that back. Yeah, that bar direction I do believe would be necessary. Yeah, so we'll leave it in. So, okay. All right, let me give these AND nodes a name here. All right, so this AND node is telling us if the wick, right, if the wick is touching the EMA 10. And then this AND node down here is telling us if the EMA is touching, I'm sorry, if the wick is touching the EMA 20. There. So, and you know, as the rules are written here, the wick can touch either the EMA 10 or, and I'm emphasizing the word or, EMA 20. So what we need is a OR node. All right, we're going to grab an OR node here. So we can connect both of these AND nodes into an OR node. And if we look at that, there, so now we can see when the wick is touching the EMA 20 or if the wick is touching the EMA 10. So there, the wick is only touching the 20, right? That wick is not touching the 10. Let's see here. Yeah, these are kind of hard to tell. But here we go. Here's a wick is definitely touching the 10. It may or may not be touching the 20. It's kind of hard to tell. So here we can see the wick is touching the 20 only. Ah, here we go. Here, perfect. So we can see here the wick is only touching the EMA 10, not the 20. But here the wicks are only touching the 20. And we're able to see, right, both of those touches using an OR node. So the last step here is to connect. Let's see here. Let's give this OR node is basically condition or rule number 3, right? So we can just kind of type a number 3 in there if we wanted to, and then we'll connect that OR node into our AND node, and that is basically our system. Or that would be all 3 of these rules. And so let's kind of take a look through the chart and make sure everything looks correct. All right, so at the beginning of the chart here, let's see here. Yep, I mean, that one looks correct. That one looks correct. That looks correct. All right, we have a long signal there. Looks good. Let's see, everything looks good so far. So, yeah, so one thing here about this is, right, these, you know, this condition is omitted because there was no pullback bar, right? These were all kind of continuation Renko bars. So there was no pullback. So when this wick touched our EMA 10, right, there was no signal because there was no pullback. So, and yeah, so basically I'm just kind of making sure that, you know, all the pullback bars at least, you know, touched or broke through the EMA 20 here. And, you know, it looks like they're all doing that. Actually, yeah, the way this Renko bar is set up, a reversal bar is always going to touch the EMA 10. Yeah, so it kind of looks like condition number 2 really wasn't necessary since pullback bars, or basically these reversal bars, are always going to touch the EMA 20. But if we do adjust our Renko bar again, oh, let's see, how did I have that working? There we go. I think I had it 2 and 2. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, even with this Renko setting, yeah, the bars are still always touching. Let's see here, what I am. I think maybe I had the reversal set to 8. I think that might prevent some of these reversal bars from pulling back and touching the EMA. Yeah, here we go. Perfect. There we go. So if I made a shorter reversal bar, there we go. So even though the wick, we can see here the wick touched the EMA 10, but we didn't get a pullback to the EMA 10. So there we go. So now we're able to kind of confirm, yeah, this condition here didn't produce a signal here. And even over here, so we did get a pullback touch to the EMA 10, but the wick didn't touch the EMA 10, like so. Yeah, and over here, the wick did not touch one of the EMAs, so no signal there. So, all right. So there we go. So we kind of tested a couple of different scenarios here, and it looks like it's all working good.